There's a lot of assumptions about autistic people, a lot of assumptions about our abilities and what we do know and what we don't know.
I have a high IQ, so I couldn't possibly need this, this and this like some other students. I wasn't allowed to be in their autism class or special needs class.
I think schools can over-focus on difficulties because obviously when a child goes in with a diagnosis of autism, it's a very detailed report from development professionals and it says what their challenges are and what supports they need. And that kind of becomes it, and the buck stops with that. Okay, do they need an SNA? Do they go to a special class? Do they participate fully in mainstream? And it becomes all about what the report says and what the label attached to that child means, instead of almost who the child is and how they express themselves. And because I suppose we over-focus on that, it means that we kind of lose the individual in it, and the label becomes centre stage, and that's really not the point of education. The point of education is to empower individuals to achieve the best they possibly can in life, whether that be going on to further education or enter the workforce or even just integrate into the community.
Just because there's some autistic people that struggle with one thing doesn't mean the other person will, and then vice versa. So it's just that kind of a lot of people don't care enough to ask us, what do you need? So they just treat us at the very same level as, you won't get this or you won't understand this.
How I looked dictated the supports I received in school. Every autistic person is different and therefore their support needs are different and vary from person to person.
I've also been judged by members of staff who do not have the training, and while they might have their hearts in the right place, it's without the training or knowledge. They really think that they really try to use their authority, like, I'm your teacher, I know what's best for you, and I've had that be a massive factor in being judged. I was once asked if I was high in regard to drugs, if during a time when I was rocking back and forth on the ground, having a meltdown, and when I was in such a state and being asked, that was just, I was genuine. I couldn't speak anyway, but that just halted me for a second.
The school environment can be extremely challenging and overwhelming for autistic teenagers like myself, for example. One of the main obstacles of the school environment could be noise, taste, smell, or even the feel of being surrounded by a lot of people, students and teachers. You feel very cramped inside. It's very overwhelming. You could feel very anxious about that kind of experience. I think it's down to the individual school overall, but from what I see from the aspect of an autistic teenager, I don't necessarily think autistic people in this nation get the support they need.
In my experience, social isolation was a huge factor in why I didn't feel like I belonged in my school. There sometimes isn't a neurodivergent group put in place. Sometimes there may not be groups that are of any interest to neurodivergent people and their special interests, and so it can be hard for them to make connections with people besides what could be what everyone is a fan of at the time.
There can also be exclusion. If there's a group of people talking about something, they will talk to their friends in the same way, and then when they're talking to you, it's different, or they might not even talk to you because they're like, oh, they won't understand this. And that is exclusion, which is, of course, a form of bullying.
It's very interesting to see when you go and you're talking to people and you're having a grand chat and then suddenly you find out you're autistic. And for some strange reason, you can be talking in a normal volume and a normal pace. And when they find that out, they get louder. And not only they get louder, they talk slower. And I'm like, oh, what's happened? I've had the label the whole time. Nothing has changed except the knowledge you now have access to. And that, it's not a negative, and I don't think people are doing it deliberately out of spite. But yet it happens, and it leads to almost curiosity of, where have I gone wrong? What have I done wrong?
Autistic teenagers' support needs are often misunderstood in school due to the lack of education on autism, stereotypes about autism, and inaccurate information about autism.
To set an example for students, there's so many teachers that I know that are like, they'll talk about autism and they'll like say it like hush, they'll go like, oh, and they were like on the spectrum, and that's not like a good thing. It's because it's not something to be ashamed about. It's not something that is this like really big issue that you have to keep quiet. It's something that people should be proud of, and it's just a different way of thinking, and people should be really proud of that, and people should be proud of being unique.
If a student is academic in school or quiet, they may not receive the supports they need. When students' support needs aren't met, it can make the school experience extremely challenging, and it can cause anxiety and can ultimately lead to a child leaving school.
I remember that one SNA, and sometimes those few teachers were the only reason I felt like I belonged at all. And I remember a lot of what my parents were saying were necessary just weren't taken into consideration because of policy.
First and foremost, one thing that any school can do to make the daily life of an autistic teenager easier in the school is simply by having the room to accommodate those who are autistic. For example, even a room, like a small room to break out from the class for 5-10 minutes, just to take the pressure off and just to calm down and to go back into class.
Staff and students should be educated on what autism actually is to reduce the stereotypes and stigma around autism. Staff need to listen directly to the autistic student.
We're made seem like we have like brains like children sometimes. We're not respected on the same level as our other students. That it can be seen that our issues aren't as important, or that we don't know what we're talking about when we're talking about our problems.
Listen to individual voices of autistic students and take into account what they say. Speak with them and not at them.
I think a huge part of respecting neurodivergent people should start from respecting their language.
And then for teachers and students alike, get to know autistic people. Like, don't make an assumption just because, oh, I've heard about the diagnosis, or I've met one other person with autism, they were like this, so I'm going to assume they're all like this. Get to know people. Everyone has unique needs. Everyone has unique personalities, you know, like we're human, you know, like that's just what it is. So get to know us as individual people, because we are all individual people, you know. So I think that's just the most important thing. Don't walk off assumptions, don't walk off the stereotypes, walk off the person you have in front of you, and just get to know what they're like, and listen to us, like.
AsIAM